Good evening, Folsom. I'm Gul Khan, and this is our forum, Folsom Insight. The purpose of this forum is to highlight the issues and the problems that Folsom is facing. Anything that Folsom is related to Folsom, or even the good things about Folsom that we want to highlight as well. Last session that we had was we were talking about Measure G, 1% increase in sales tax. That was our first session on that topic. We are going to continue on that one in today's session as well to talk about more in detail. And for that purpose, we have Bruce with us. You're welcome. We needed you actually to close the loop on so many different questions people have been asking. And people ask questions about alternate solutions that we had, which we did not cover in our first session because we had a limited time. So before we go into that, Bruce, I want you to just recap, maybe in 10, 15 seconds, what we talked about Measure G, what it is, and what exactly is the impact of that one in the daily life for some residents.
The Measure G is a special sales tax to raise our sales tax equivalent to what other cities are in Sacramento County, from 7.75% to 8.75, so 1 penny on a dollar, to benefit police, fire, parks and trails, roadway and stormwater, economic development. The reason for it is our city is in a very, very challenging financial position where there is no money going to parks, no money going to trail renovation. We have fewer police officers than we did in 2008, 15 years ago. We have far fewer firefighters than we did 15 years ago, and that's just not an acceptable situation for our city, this unique, wonderful place.
Thanks for the recap. So viewers, this is exactly what we are going to be talking about today, is the comparison with the other cities that we have in surrounding areas, and what are the alternate solutions. So Bruce, tell me, first of all, what is the sales tax that the other cities, Rancho Cordova, Sacramento, Roseville, Rockland, how much is the tax they are paying right now? And a very common question, a lot of people have commented on that one, is why 1%? Why not 0.5%? So if you can just explain that a little bit.
By region, by area. So every city in Sacramento County has increased their sales tax by 1%, except Citrus Heights. They've tried and they did not succeed. Citrus Heights is a very different city than ours. They don't have their own fire department. They don't have their own parks department. So it's really an outlier, a totally different situation. But when you asked about why 0.5% versus 1%, is that we do not believe you can solve the needs in the city, and we do not want to come back, but with a 0.5% sales tax, it's just a Band-Aid. And we don't want to come back to the citizens again, ever. And that's why we've built in the economic development piece to this, and I can talk about that if you like. But Rancho, for example, they did a 0.5% sales tax. Guess what? Came back, I want to say it was probably 7 years later, had to do it again. We don't want to be in a situation. Folsom has never raised its sales tax above the minimum. The other interesting thing about a lot of those cities is they all have adopted the stormwater fee. Our city has never adopted a stormwater fee. Stormwater fees in many of those places are $12 to $20 a month, in addition to their sales tax. So that's one of the reasons why we fund a stormwater work in our measure, so that we don't have to come back and ask for a stormwater fee. We've got it solved, and we think it's the right thing to do.
So now let's also talk about any alternate solutions. What I was thinking is the easiest thing a government can do is to raise taxes. If I don't do a good job as a council member, eventually what I would do is I would say, I could not do my job, so hey, residents, please raise taxes, pay more money. Have we talked about or did you had any internal conversation or considered raising our transient occupancy tax, TOT tax, for the hotels and in this area? I believe Folsom has, the last I checked was only 8% was the Folsom tax. Statewide, it's about between 10 to 12%. That's the tax we have. And that tax is going to be paid by only the people who are going to come from outside Folsom, and they're going to be residing over here. Though that is one example I give you of an alternate solution. We need to has somebody done some homework that how much tax we're going to be creating if we increase that by 1% or 2%?
One, trying to understand the problem, but then two, it's like, okay, what do we need to do and how should we do it? We didn't come to this saying, let's raise taxes. So there are a number of things that people talk about. Transient occupancy tax or TOT is one. If that's the case, it generates about $2 to $2.5 million a year. Not sufficient to solve the problems. As I mentioned in an earlier segment, heck, the trail maintenance, the trail renovation is $2.5 million. If we want to hire firefighters, takes 9 in a station, that's going to eat up that $2.5 million right there. So we looked at it, but when you mentioned it's paid for by visitors, that's the benefit about a sales tax, is that 40% of sales tax that's generated is also generated by visitors. So those people coming to visit us pay for the services that they use when they come here, at our parks, at our library, at our aquatic center. So that's how we address that. There are other pieces that people talk about. By the way, TOT would have to go to the voters just like this would. Others that were considered are stormwater fee. I mentioned a minute ago, Folsom does not have a stormwater fee. And that would generate another about $2 million. But again, then it's based on the property owner itself. And it could be a business, they're going to pass it on to the tenant. If it's an apartment, they're going to pass it on to the apartment, the tenant in the apartment. And does it make sense to have a stormwater fee that's basically $12 to $20 a year, $12 to $20 a month, when that's the exact approximate same amount that you would spend on sales tax if you were spending $12,000 on sales tax in Folsom? That generates, that would be about $12. So then you'd only get it for stormwater. What we looked at is the holes in all general fund departments, police, fire, parks, etc. Other people talk about, buy local. We heard that the other night at the city council meeting. Well, we should just encourage people to buy local. If we just had a buy local, that would solve our problem. But Ghoul, it's interesting, let me just do a little math for you. If you could get people to buy local, and they're going to spend, let's say it's $1 million more buying local instead of somewhere else. So $1 million. Okay? We get 1 cent per dollar, right? So times 0.01. Guess how much that generates? $10,000. I mean, for all that effort, I'm not saying it shouldn't be tried. We should be, as one of the speakers the other night at the city council meeting, Dean Williams, said, this needs to be a multi-pronged approach. We shouldn't leave no nickel on the ground. But you cannot get out of this problem by just saying, let's just shop local. Let's raise fees. That was another thought that a lot of people have. Well, let's just raise fees at the aquatic center. Let's raise fees at the zoo. Well, if you raised all the fees on all those recreational things by 5%, that generates $235,000. That doesn't even buy one police officer for 1 year. So, and I'm not poo-pooing any of those, because like I said, we should be doing everything possible. But the only viable solution is a sales tax. And the viable, acceptable solution in our minds is a special sales tax, so we know exactly where our money is going.
That's actually all gonna be really great if we have that much money available, and that would help us in overcoming the problems that we are having, especially the fiscal issues that we have right now. We will be able to hire more police officers, have more money for fire, park and rec, and other facilities as well. Let's talk about the downside in case if this measure does not pass. What is our plan B? Do we have a plan B right now?
There's a lot of ideas that have been floated around. These are not new ideas either, by the way, Gul. I mean, the city has done a lot relative to trying to generate revenue through recreational programs, through a buy local program. The chamber's been very active about that. And I hate panic peddling. I do not like to panic pedal, meaning, oh geez, if you don't vote for this, the world's going to come to an end. It's not going to come to an end. We are not going to go bankrupt. But the reality is there will be service cuts. The manager has said it in multiple occasions. You can look at any budget message for the last 6 years, and each time there will be service cuts. I mean, the reality is if we have a structural deficit and if you bring in an extra $6.8 million of revenue, which we do on property tax, but you have expenses that also increase. So a lot of people say, well, geez, you've brought $6.8 million in revenue in, but they forget to look at the other side of the balance sheet. The other side of the balance sheet is that there's $5 million of expenses extra each year. Things go up. A good example is our insurance costs. Last year, the city's insurance costs went up $2 million. $2 million in 1 year. What will the city have to do? It's going to have to reduce services. It already is reducing services, Ghoul, in parks. In January, they reduced park maintenance by $300,000. This budget, they also proposed to reduce parks maintenance by another $300,000. And it was only as a result of some discussions with the council on that first budget meeting that they said they'll use one-time funds to see what happens on the sales tax measure to get that at least back to the level of January, to try to keep these parks intact for a while. But yeah, you got to look at a lot of other things. How can we generate revenue by sports programs? Do we have to raise fees? Do we have to reduce hours? Again, I don't want to panic pedal because we've all heard that. Prop 13, 218, oh, the sky is going to, Again, we're not going to go out of business, but life will be different in Folsom than it is now. And will get worse as we go along.
How long I have to continue paying this tax? Can this be, right now we need, let's say one example is we need a $5 million, and we are raising now with this tax about $29 million. And let's say in the next 4 or 5 years, we think that, we have a sufficient amount right now. And with this sufficient amount, we don't need to continue paying the same amount of tax again. So can this be reduced, or is there a timeline with this one that we don't only need to raise this tax only for X number of years?
Sure. There is no sunset for this special sales tax. Just the same as other cities. There's not a sunset typically. And the reason for that is if you want to hire police officers, if you want to hire firefighters, that's got to be an ongoing source. You can't just say, well, we'll figure that out in 10 years. You've got to be do fiscal planning. We think that the formula that was created in this is the right mix. 20% police, 20% fire, 15% to parks, trails, economic development. Maybe in a few years down the road, we end up being wrong. Maybe police needs more, or maybe they need less, or maybe parks needs more, or maybe they need less. The way to change that then is going back to the voters. The city council could say, we want to put because this will be an ordinance. They're going to put an ordinance on to say, we're going to change the formula. We're going to change the mix of this. And they could do that by a simple majority vote of the people, if that's what the need was. I don't have a crystal ball. All the other people that, looked at this, chamber, Folsom Athletic Association, fire, law enforcement, it could change, but it would be a vote of the people to change that.
So it means that you're saying there's not going to be another need for increasing another 1% or another 0.5% after this increase. Hopefully, if we have to reduce it, people can still vote for that one and we can reduce that one.
So our belief is that this 1% solves its problems and does it well. Police at 20% get $5.8 million a year. Fire, $5.8 million a year. But one of the categories is economic development and special projects. You've got to build the pot. I'll use Central Business District Master Plan as a good example. I know you're familiar with that. Went through the process. They're going to ultimately adopt a master plan to revitalize that Central Business District area along Bidwell between Blue Ravine and Sutter Middle School. To do that, when you put money into that project, those businesses will do better, generating more sales tax, so we don't have to come back again. I firmly believe that we won't have to come back again, and I firmly believe that you will not have to adopt a stormwater fee. When you asked a little bit ago, well, what's plan B? What would they have to do? Well, they're going to have to be fee increases. There will have to be stormwater fee adopted. They'll probably have to do a TOT. But again, that will not solve the problem. Those numbers are much too small compared to the big deficits that exist in these general fund departments. And all I do is ask folks to go to the budget documents, go to the February request that was put out by each department, and look and see if you think there's a lot of fluff that was asked by these departments like police and fire. And I'm here to tell you that the answer is no. These are essential services that the law enforcement and fire public safety folks said, this is what's necessary to provide a safe community. And so I don't believe that more money will be necessary. I know that people might be skeptical of that. Oh, sure. You tell us that. But Folsom has been very good and has held on for a long, long time without having to do this increase. Probably should have done it 4 years ago. Didn't. So I don't believe they will need to come back. And I certainly won't be there advocating for it, I'll tell you that.
Good to know that. I definitely don't want to have another session with you advocating for another tax increase.
No.
All right, let's talk about this Measure G, sales tax increase, and how is this aligned with our long-term goals of the city of Folsom? How is this aligning our strategic plans for Folsom?
Sure. Another very good question. So I think what you look at the strategic planning document, and it has a number of pieces. Fire, police. This will fund those positions. One of them is, how do we have a long-term funding source to support our police and fire? The other piece is, how are we going to help our neighbors south of 50 or Folsom Ranch? I mean, there's not a beat assigned in Folsom Ranch. There's not officers sufficient to do a beat. Now, they've just added 3 from the general fund and 3 from salary savings. So that'll address this criminal element of the homeless population, but it will also hopefully provide a beat south of 50. We also want to make sure that south of 50 Folsom Ranch has ambulance service. There's nothing scheduled for Station 34. Nothing scheduled for Station 34 for EMS. So they have to come from north of 50. So, those are the pieces in terms of providing public safety that mesh well, and that is exactly what our city is here to do. Provide services to our community. And that's what Measure G does.
I want to know, you create a great detail of in our last session and this session as well. So I really thank you for spending time and then really explaining all of that. I have now way more knowledge about this one compared to what I had before as well. So that's a great information, and everyone who has to vote on this one definitely should have this much information, whether they vote yes or no on that. I want to know that what the people are thinking. Have you talked to the people and also, for example, what your Folsom PD is saying, what Folsom Fire Department is saying, what the other agencies within Folsom unions, are they saying anything about it? They're supporting it, or they are still neutral on that?
Sure. Great questions. So we have talked to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. We collected over 8,200 signatures of Folsom voters to qualify this for the ballot. And of course, during that time, we talked to triple that probably when we're collecting those signatures. And of course, the knee-jerk reaction almost always is, heck no, don't tax me anymore. Why? Because they associate taxes with the state and the county and the feds and don't trust it. So when you go and explain that this money must stay in Folsom, can only be used in Folsom and can only be used for these purposes, and it's not just a giveaway to politicians on the council to spend however they like. But when they know that it goes for essential services, then they, generally speaking, support it. All the unions are supportive of this, with the exception of one. Police is staying neutral. You'd have to ask them about why. I think it's a question of, is there enough money for public safety? I'll address the fire folks, and their approach to it is that this is a whole city approach, is what fire says. Dan Carson is the rep on there, very good young firefighter. And a doctor uses this analogy of, well, we don't treat, when we have a sick patient, we don't just treat the arm, we treat the patient. And we have a problem within all of our community. And so it should not be just public safety only. It should be public safety, parks, and trails if we want to have a whole community that everybody benefits by. And so hats off to the approach that the fire guys take. Would they have liked to have had more than 20%? Of course they would. Who wouldn't? But they also say, we've got a city that we've got to take care of. And they also recognize that $5.8 million a year does a whole lot for public safety. Police, fire each get $5.8 million based on current projections. That's a great amount of money that we can do wonderful things with in our community.
Thank you, Bruce. This is great. Now, let's, if I give you in 30 seconds, just if you want to say anything to the residents of Folsom. This forum is about you, and Folsom residents, this forum is about you. You need to decide on November 5th whether you pass this Measure G or not. Bruce, you have a chance, you have a forum now. If you want to directly look them in the eye and tell them why they should approve this.
Oh, well, thanks, Ghoul. I'll just sort of my 20-second elevator speech. And that is that we live in a very unique and very special community. And this community is financially strapped in all its general fund departments. Absolutely. That is fact. And what I encourage folks to do is get educated on it. And sales tax is the only viable alternative. We talked a little bit about some of those other alternatives. You can't just say, well, just have developers pay more. They pay a lot already. And under the law, you can't just say, you ought to pay more. But the fact that this is a special sales tax to go for essential services, and that it cannot be taken by the county, it can't be taken by the state, and that we get that money, whether it's online shopping or in person, and that we can solve our fiscal problems. And the result of not doing that is challenging, for sure, absolutely challenging. And nobody likes to pay more. But the reality is the cost is very insignificant. As I use that example, if you spend $15,000 on taxable goods in Folsom, your total extra cost is $150 a year for that family. Not unappreciable, but the reality is if I want to have good police services, I want to have parks where we can play on safely and have tournaments coming in and generate more money, that's what we need. So what I really encourage folks to do is don't just believe Bruce. Don't just believe the committee members. Go to our website and look at those trusted voices. Jim Snook from Snook's Candies, Karen Holmes, Colleen Shannon, Steve Hurd, great realtor in our community. Talk to those folks, look at what they have to say, see them on the street and ask them questions about it. And go to the city's website also. The city will have a fact-based, not advocacy-based, but a fact-based. Go to Folsom's website and look at their fiscal focus and educate yourself. And say, and then ask yourself, is it worth investing in my community? We're living paycheck to paycheck right now. And is it worth living in a quality community like Folsom to pay just a little bit more to make sure that we have a safe community and we've got good parks and we've got good trails? We try to relieve some congestion and we take care of our Folsom Ranch neighbors also they're paying a lot in property tax over there, which we really didn't cover. It's really another topic which we could even talk about too. But if we want to take care of our whole community, this is essential. I'm telling you, it is essential for our town.
Thank you, Bruce. This is great. It's been a pleasure talking to you and really great information. I hope that your message went across to the right people, and the residents of Folsom, they have to make a call on this one and they understand that. We will come back again with another session of Folsom Insight with a different topic or different issues Folsom is facing. If you would like to come to our program or you want to suggest a topic that you would like to discuss, anything, please feel free to comment, reach out to our website or to me as well directly. You will have all my information in the comment section. Thank you very much.